All right, so good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And we're really excited because this is our new year, 2019-2020 season, and we are starting off with an entire month dedicated to ocean plastic. This is one of the biggest issues in the world. This is something that you guys can take part and do a great deal of good for. And today we're thrilled to be joined by our speaker, who I'll get to in just a second. But first, we're joined by 4 classes from across North America. I want to give them a chance to say hi. We got Mrs. Brochu, who's grade 4-5s in Calgary, Alberta, joining for the first time ever. Hi, guys. We've got Miss Stevens, grade 5s in Carlisle, Ontario, having severe mic problems. Hey, they can hear me. They got it working. Yes. Awesome, guys. Way to go. All right. We've got Miss Walchuk's grade 5s through 7s in McBride in British Columbia. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey. And last but not least, we have a mystery class who I don't know, but there's no teacher name on the thing, but they just joined us a second ago. So hi to you guys. Awesome. Hey, we'll find out who you are later. But first, I want to introduce our speaker. So we are joined live by Rachael Bell-Irving. So she is at Oceanwise, or the Vancouver Aquarium in Vancouver, in beautiful Stanley Park. She's joined us for over 40 hangouts. I think this is the first of the year with us, maybe the second, maybe Joe's done one, but we're always thrilled to have you back. And she's going to tell us a little bit today, again, about ocean plastics. So we'll dive in with her. Thank you so much for joining us, Rachael, and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jesse. It's great to be back. Happy September 2019, everybody. Oh my gosh. Sorry, my coffee's kicking in. So this is a really fun morning to come and chat about ocean plastics. It's a really important issue. It's one of many issues that are facing the ocean right now, but something that every single person has a hand in. And there's lots of different ways that we can tackle the problem. And the best way to start by doing that is simply understanding that it is a problem and where it comes from and how it is caused. So we're going to dive into just talking about very briefly what plastic is, why we're concerned about it, some of the sources that it comes from, some research that Oceanwise is doing, and then we'll leave lots of time for questions and whatnot. A couple of things, as Jesse said, I work for Oceanwise. We're an international ocean conservation organization dedicated to seeing a future of healthy and flourishing oceans. Our home base is located at the Vancouver Aquarium in Stanley Park on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations peoples. And I'm in the aquarium right now. We are still closed to the public, so you are currently the only people in the building, which is very exciting. However, if you do hear some background noises, that is because we still have staff taking care of all the animals that we have, like some of the ones behind me. I've got Skuna, the sea turtle, swimming over my head at the moment. So she's quite a charismatic one to have around. And there's lots of exciting things to see if you get the chance to come visit us. And we are a nonprofit, so everything that we do is dedicated directly back to caring for our animals or the animals in the wild. So that being said, one of the many things we do is research, and we'll talk about that a little bit today. Before we get started, I'd like to see a wave from the students if you have heard about plastic pollution before. All right, pretty much everybody's hand is waving. Excellent. So this is a very current topic for us to talk about, and it's also an important one because it is human caused, which means if we're the cause of the problem, we are also a powerful solution on that front as well. Now, I think it's incredibly important to recognize that plastic is very useful. It was invented for a reason. When it was invented, it actually helped to preserve our food, which allowed humans to have a safer supply and actually helped us to live longer at the end of the day. Plastic can be used for so many things because it can be transformed into lots of different shapes, sizes, and textures. We have lots of different types of plastics as well, and that's part of what the problem is. But what I'd like you to do is point to something made of plastic in your classroom. Oh, I got someone holding up a plastic bag too. Excellent. So when we're looking around our environment, we can generally find 2 different types of plastics. We can find what I like to call useful plastics, which are things that we probably use multiple times a day over and over and over again. So for example, if you are sitting on a chair, there's a very good chance that chair is made out of plastic. Or if you're sitting on a carpet, or even some of our flooring, there's a good chance that that might be made out of plastic as well. Now, this is really useful. It means that we get lots of use out of it, and it helps us improve our lives. The other type of plastic are what we call single-use plastic items. So we use them once, and then we throw them away. And that's not nearly as useful. Now, before I dive into some more plastics, I'd like to know some of your previous knowledge of what you've heard or what you've learned. So Jesse, if you don't mind helping me out, I'd like to go to each classroom and get one threat from plastic. So why is plastic a problem? Let's get some examples from the students.
Okay, well, Miss Stevens' class, everyone's got their hand up, so we'll start with them. What do you guys think? A threat from plastics?
Noah.
Lots of animals are dying from it, and it's gonna ruin the food chain and everything.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So animals can die from it. It can ruin the food chain. Interesting.
Great answer. All right, Miss Brochu's class. What do you guys think? You guys are so polite. Usually people are screaming in these moments.
Really loud so you can hear it. Well, pollution, so water and stuff.
No, that's good, guys. We've got pollution in the water. Okay.
Yes, that's really important. We're going to touch on that in a second.
All right, Miss Frawley's class. Any thoughts? Issues about plastic? Miss Frawley's class. Sorry, wrong class. There we go. Yeah, there you go. You're good.
Go ahead.
Okay. Because animals can get their heads stuck inside.
Stuck in it? Yeah.
Hey, yeah, entanglement is a big one.
Yeah. And then last but not least, Miss Walchuk's class, who I'll actually demute this time. There we go. What do you guys think?
Louder. Oh. Okay, hold on. We're just gonna get a little closer.
Take your time. All good, guys.
Plastics can pollute the ocean, and they can save.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what we're looking at is plastics in the ocean specifically. So these are all really good things to know. And what I'm going to encourage you to try and deepen your knowledge on is the how. So it's easy enough for us to say plastics is bad. But when we become smart change makers, we're able to say why and we're able to say how. So for example, talking about polluting the waters is a really good one because that affects humans as much as it affects the animals. And someone else mentioned food chain and entanglement. Those are really good examples of how plastic specifically impacts the environment. And the reason why it's a concern is because when we look at the globe, the ocean is one massive ocean. We've described it in a couple different sections, but really it is all interconnected. So any plastic that gets into the waterways, whether that's through a storm drain in your city, a river, a lake, streams, or the ocean itself, or even on a field that's swept up by weather, it's able to get into the giant circulation system of the planet, which is the ocean. And that's why we're majorly concerned, because we start to see plastics, especially single-use plastic items, arriving on coastlines across the globe. For example, we did a shoreline cleanup up in Haida Gwaii, which is in northern British Columbia, about 2 years ago. And we found brands that were from Iceland, that were German, that were Japanese, that were Swedish, that were Russian. I think I also found Portuguese deodorant. That was really interesting. So you can get garbage and waste from all around the world collecting on our shorelines. And this is why it's a global problem. And there isn't just one person to blame, because as soon as it's in the water, we're all contributing to that. And the most important thing, again, that we look at is what happens to plastic when it gets in the water. So imagine you're in the water, you're swimming through the ocean, it is salty, you can taste it on your tongue, and the waves are crashing around, there's sunlight beating down on you. When we get those sort of conditions, plastic starts to change. And it'll never go away because it was man-made with chemicals. It's not able to go back into the environment. Instead, it just breaks up into little tiny pieces that we call microplastic. So take a look at your pinky nail, and you'll see there's that little top line of your pinky nail. That's about how big microplastic is, or even smaller. So imagine the size of a grain of rice, or tinier. Now here at OceanWise, we are looking at different types of those microplastics, and they come in lots of different forms. Primary means it was made to be tiny. So microbeads used to be found in things like our toothpaste or face washes. They're now banned in Canada, which is great. However, there might still be some on the shelves or coming in from other countries. So that's a start. We have found one solution so far, which is awesome. We can keep rolling with that. And nurdles are the building blocks of plastic. So kind of neat to think about, how is plastic made? Well, people will make tiny pieces of nurdles, which is just little building blocks of plastic. They'll ship them around the world to then be built into other pieces of plastic, like water bottles or plastic bags or things like that. Now, secondary microplastics are the plastics that started off big and became small through either water breakdown or chemical breakdown or things like that. So fragments are those little pieces we find on the beach. Synthetic fibers are ones that we focus on a lot here at Oceanwise. So what I'd like all of you to do, synthetic fibers are kind of a new topic as of late, and that's because we all use them, and it's in our clothing. So there's a good chance that your clothing might be made out of plastic. So we're gonna pause for a second. I'm gonna give you a minute. I'd like you to look at the tag of your jacket, of your shirt, maybe help your friend, and see what the ingredients are of your clothing. I know mine is polyester and spandex, I believe. Let me check.
I think we should incorporate the same exercise into like an ape-based Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants hangout later, like picking ticks off. This is brilliant.
Oh, great. It is a fun one. Like, it's kind of surprising sometimes to be like, oh yeah, like, especially when you look at like rain jackets, those get weird.
By the way, I love the class participation. We've never had this question interspersed into a hangout before, so this is awesome, guys. Thanks so much.
Oh, I love this one. Well, what we'll do is maybe in another 30 seconds or so, we can actually go to class and we'll see what ingredients they found. I'm sure there'll be quite a bit of cotton.
All right.
All right, I see some stillness.
Stillness? Okay, well, if there's stillness, we'll go to the class. So Miss Brochu's class, what did you guys find?
What did you find, Julia? Like loud.
My zipper.
Zipper on the sweater's plastic.
Yeah.
That's a good observation.
Okay. And then Miss Stevens' class. Yeah, you guys are good. You can yell it out. You can say, what did you find? A bunch of stuff? Yes, I know. We're on YouTube. It's very exciting. Okay. Miss Frawley's class, did you guys find anything?
Found rayon, polyester, spandex,
And
cotton.
Cotton?
All right, solid.
Excellent. All right. And then Miss Walchuk's group.
Cotton. I made in polyester.
Yeah. Awesome. By the way, I like that you guys are in the light now. It's exciting. Okay.
It was great. You listed off a lot of the common ones. So cotton is natural fiber, and we can always talk about cotton in another program, but talking about plastic specifically, polyester, the rayon, nylon, spandex, acrylic, those are all synthetic fibers. So humans have been intelligent enough and creative enough to actually invent plastic fibers to make clothing out of. That's pretty awesome because it protects us from the weather, it keeps us safe. The problem that we're facing right now is that when we wash our clothes, those microfibers go down the drain and can end up in the water systems. So this is what some of the research Oceanwise is doing right now, is trying to see if we can find microfibers in the food web. So I'm actually going to show my slides again because we can practice a little bit in terms of what it means to look at plastic pollution from a research standpoint. So this is a picture of kind of how we can get plastics into the ecosystem. And as somebody mentioned again, the food web is the big concern because microfibers or microplastics in general are the perfect size to be eaten by small creatures. So corals, for example, that you might find in a tropical habitat behind me, or things like krill or shrimp, or anything that's at the bottom of the food chain, which again is eaten by the little fish, which is then eaten by the bigger fish, which is then eaten by top predators like orca whales, like seals, and humans as well. So there is that really deep connection with the ocean that we need in order to survive through things like food that we are inevitably actually polluting as well. So this is why it's valuable for humans to look at this kind of problems and to actually invest in the environment so that we're keeping ourselves safe as well. So this is an example of how we might go about trying to actually find those synthetic fibers in an experiment. So this experiment was looking at mussels in British Columbia. And basically it started with a dissection, so taking apart the mussel and basically dissolving it or digesting it through chemicals. So as if it were in your stomach, you've got acid in your stomach that breaks down your food. Julie in the photo does that in a petri dish. And so she dissolves the mussels, runs them through a filter, and then anything that's left on the filter is going to be under a microscope to see if there are any synthetic fibers or not. And of the microplastics she found, about 91% of those plastics were synthetic fibers. This was only a 2-year test, so we would have to do a lot more research before we can say definitively that plastic is in mussels, but it is a starting point and a little bit of a concerning one. Another project that's currently going on is looking at the Arctic food web. And so this one, you're gonna see some beluga stomachs. This is Rhiannon, and she has the privilege of going up to the Inuit community of Tuktoyaktuk once a year. And when they do their beluga hunt, they have in the past donated the stomachs of the beluga to the research so that we can start dissecting them and doing that same process, looking at what is in the stomach, looking at what is in the feces, and trying to see if there are plastics as well. So same process, dissection, dissolving, and then filtering to see what is left. And what's really cool about the beluga is that you can see the entire food web in its stomach. Here on the photo, we've got a little tiny bug in that sort of left-hand corner of the big tray. We've got some little fish, we've got a big fish. All of these things are found inside of the beluga stomach and gives us a really good look at that whole food web to see if it has plastics in it or not. I have not heard the results of that study yet, so I can't give you an answer, but all of this is ongoing. And when you're actually looking at it under a microscope, it can be hard to tell whether or not it's plastics. So this is a microscopic slide, and we're gonna take a little bit of a vote. It can either be microfibers, like synthetic fibers, or it might be algae, because sometimes we'll find lots of organic things on these slides as well. So if you think that it is a synthetic fiber, put up your hand. All right, okay, we got a few people. All right, hands down. If you think that it is algae, put up your hand. All right, it's pretty evenly divided. Well, let's take a look. If I can get a bit of a drum roll. Boom. That was a synthetic fiber. That was from a rain jacket. So that's just one example, but let's try again. We'll give it another shot. All right, here we go. We've got another sample here. Let's see, hands up if you think this is a synthetic fiber. Oh, almost nobody. Okay, interesting. Put your hand up if you think this is a seaweed. Oh, wow, most people, interesting. All right, I'm curious as to what your observations are. Well, let's take a look. Drum roll, please. And boom. Well done, everybody. That was indeed a seaweed. Nicely done. All right, I've got 2 more, and then we'll get into some questions. So here's another one. Hands up if you think it is fiber. All right, we're a bit more split this time. Interesting. All right, hands up if you think it is a seaweed. Okay, yeah, we see some people are not really sure. This is what our researchers are doing pretty much every day, looking under a microscope, trying to guess. Luckily, we've got some equipment that can help us profile what type of plastics they are if we find plastics, but getting to that in the first place is tricky. So last one, drum roll, please. Is it seaweed? Is it fiber? Let's find out. This is a very common one. This is fleece. So fleece is usually made out of synthetic fiber and is actually one of the most prevalent shedders that we get when it comes to microfibers. So this is just one example of the things that we can do to help tackle the plastic problem, and that's research. So if you're someone who likes to focus, likes to look at those little details, likes to be very detail oriented, then research might be a track for you to explore and help find out the answer to plastic pollution. However, that's just one thing that we can do. There are lots of stuff that we can do in order to reduce the amount of especially single-use plastic that we're using. So I've got some ideas, but I would like to hear from you. What are your ideas of how we might be able to start tackling plastic pollution? So Jesse, if you can help me, let's go class to class and see what some ideas we have to start with.
Sure can. Okay, we'll start with Miss Walchuk this time. What do you guys think? Ways we can help plastic, end plastic, curb pollution.
How can we get rid of the plastic? What can we do to stop it down?
You gotta speak up louder. We could louder. You gotta go louder, Walker.
All good. Don't be embarrassed.
We could help. Well, all of us could start cleaning up plastics around the ocean.
Yeah.
Hey, nice. Cleanup is a great idea. There is a lot of garbage that's already out there. So if we can help try and get rid of that, that's a great start.
Perfect. All right, Miss Frawley's class.
Hello.
Really?
We could use metal straws instead of plastic straws, and we could use like different kinds of forks and stuff and paper plates.
That's
Those
all.
all recyclable.
Excellent.
Yeah, I like that idea. Thank you. So alternative materials is a fantastic place to start. If it doesn't have to be made out of plastic, then maybe we can find some better solutions. Awesome.
All right, Miss Stevens' class. What do you guys think? What was that? Oh, I think your audio might be a little wonky again. We'll come back. We'll come back, and hopefully by Q&A you're all good. But we'll go to Miss Brochu's class for now.
Say it loud.
What do you guys think?
Reuse. Okay, I can see you. I just couldn't quite hear you. So
Yeah.
reuse is great because, again, plastic is important. So if we do have to use plastic, which sometimes we do, we can use it to the fullest extent of its life period instead of using it once and throwing it away. These are all fantastic solutions. And because y'all are old enough and able to start tackling this, I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint. When we want to make change, there are 3 ways we can tackle it. We can look at community, we can look at government policy, and we can look at businesses. These are the 3 pillars in terms of actually making real change. And you mentioned a lot of community initiatives. So things like cleanups, things like changing your personal habits. Those are all fantastic things that we can do. And if you feel like taking it to the next step, we can start talking to businesses and we can start talking to politicians and saying, this is unacceptable. Here are my ideas. Let's work together to make it happen. All you need are some skills, and you can find that through programs like OceanWise offers. There's programs all across North America to help develop those skills. But you have a very loud voice, and you've got a lot of power to make that change happen. So if you're interested in that, please continue to dive in. And the most important thing you can do today is talk to somebody about it. So when you go home, find one of those changes that you can make, or find one person that you can help educate and inspire to change plastic habits and help each other. It is a daunting task, but because there's so many solutions that we can start with, pick one and go with it, and we'll start making a lot of change. So I think we've got some time for questions, which is great. So Jesse, we can definitely open up the floor and dive into it.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much, Rachel, as always. It's always a pleasure. That was fantastic. What we're going to do, yes, dive into questions. We've also got a whack of groups, 14 groups watching right now on YouTube Live. So if you guys want to type in questions, we'd love to have you do that. I'll pass them on to Rachel. I'm also going to pass along some resources related to all the things that Rachel mentioned at the end of the session to our live classroom. So you can look forward to that in your inbox and share those as well. But yeah, let's dive in. We'll start with Ms. Brochu's class. You guys want to kick us off? Come on up.
Yeah, go closer and ask your question.
Okay. So if like this big fish eats a smaller fish that ate some plastic, does it still get affected?
It can potentially, yes. So if a big fish were to eat a little fish that has plastic in it, what's going to happen? A couple of different things are going to happen. One, that fish, if it fills up on too much plastic, it can get sick, which is why we see things like whales washing up on the beach with plastic in their stomach. It's kind of like if you were to eat M&Ms and only M&Ms, you would feel full, but you would also get sick. So that's one thing that can happen. The second thing that can happen is the plastic might actually go through their digestive system and be pooped out, which is great, except because the plastic doesn't dissolve or disappear, it would then sink to the bottom and potentially infect another ecosystem. So that's another thing that can happen. And the third thing is that plastic absorbs chemicals really easily. So if that prey happened to eat some plastic that had chemicals in it, the bigger fish would also get sick from that too. So there are a couple different ways it can get sick, but the point is that plastic isn't going away. That's kind of the biggest challenge.
Yeah, excellent. All right. We'll go to Miss Stevens' class. Hopefully your guys' mic is working. Do you want to ask?
What is the most common plastic?
Ooh, the most common plastic. Interesting question. There are 7 types of common plastic that you can find. I don't know all of their names, but there are more than that as well. So 7 that we commonly find, but there are more types of plastic like that. I would say right now the most dangerous plastic is styrofoam because we don't have a way of recycling it at all. So recycling needs to be improved already, but styrofoam cannot be recycled. So that's one that we definitely see a lot of, and it breaks up very easily. It's one of the, I would say, the more dangerous plastics and definitely commonly found because the little pieces can spread out everywhere.
And so talk about a really easy solution. Styrofoam we often get when we go takeout containers. If you bring your own Tupperware, if you bring your own dishes, you avoid that being created in the first place, and then it doesn't get in the ocean, and it's something that we don't need to worry about being recycled because it's not there in the first place. Excellent. All right, Miss Fraley's class. I will pronounce your name correctly, and we'll take a question from you guys. Perfect.
How many coral reefs got destroyed by plastic?
Ooh, that's a great question, and I don't have an answer because there are lots of coral reefs that aren't even being looked at. They cover a lot of the, especially tropical water. There's also cold water corals, any of which have not been under study. So I don't have an answer because there's just not enough information.
Yeah, but it's a good question to highlight coral reefs being affected by plastic. If you get like a plastic bag over a coral reef, it will kill it. So it's something that's not just climate change, it's not just habitat destruction. Plastic does play a role there as well. I also want to note, so yes, Miss Fraley's class, grade 6 is from Sarnia, Ontario. So thanks so much for joining in, and we're so glad to have you. All right, Miss Walchuk's group, if you guys want to dive in, question, come on up.
How much plastic have you guys found yet?
How much plastic? Again, a very good question. I don't have an answer because plastic, as it breaks down, gets smaller and smaller. It's nearly impossible to measure it. So people estimate that there is currently the equivalent of a dump truck per minute going into the water. So in theory, based on like very rough numbers, there could potentially be a dump truck worth of plastic going into the ocean every minute. However, I don't have a specific value. And that's why we talk a lot about trying to reduce our plastic habits to start with. I've got a scenario for you and explain a little bit why. Imagine that you've come home after school and you step into a puddle of water and you think that's not good. So you go into your house or your home and you find that someone has left the tap running and the sink is clogged. So your kitchen sink is overflowing with water. It's over the counters, it's onto the floor, it's covering your entire floor. You've got a mop and a bucket. What is the first thing you should do? Let's go to Walchuk's class. What is the first thing that you think you should do in that scenario?
Unplug the drain.
A little louder?
Louder?
Unplug the drain.
Unplug the drain? Absolutely. The water's still going though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Turn off the sink.
There you
Turn
go.
off the sink. Yeah. Multiple things we got to do. The very first thing we need is to turn off the sink, is to stop that flow at its source. And then we can unplug the drain, then we can mop up all the water, then we can do all the cleanup. So that's the same with plastics. If we can stop the amount of plastic going into the environment, that is going to make a massive amount of change because then we can really focus on hopefully cleaning up or restoring as much of the ocean as possible.
All right. We're going to take online questions. So Miss Nunez, she hasn't asked a question yet, sorry. Miss Wright's group, grade 2s in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, and we've got Miss Antunes, grade 4s in York, Pennsylvania. Both asked a very similar question. So what kind of animals are affected by plastic pollution? And Miss Wright's class student wanted to ask specifically for turtles, if you have any information about them.
Yeah, the short answer is all animals are potentially affected by plastic because plastic is found in so many different shapes and sizes. So looking at the little animals, they can eat the microplastic and that can make you infected with chemicals and things like that. When if we look at big animals like sea turtles, they're at very big risk of entanglement, which means they were trapped up in something. And that could be nets, fishing nets made out of plastic. That could also be plastic bags. Many sea turtles like to eat jellyfish, and jellyfish underwater look quite a lot like plastic bags. So we've seen that. We've also seen videos online of straws getting stuck up their noses, things like that. So all animals can be affected by plastic because plastic, being such a cool invention, is able to be made in lots of different shapes and sizes.
Excellent. All right, we've got a bunch of other, we got so many questions being asked on YouTube, which is fantastic. So Miss Ksenia class in Carroll Stream, Illinois wants to ask if, Emma wants to ask if seals or other animals get those rings, and we mentioned this in one of the earlier questions too, they get stuck on their necks. Like, does that affect animals? Is it big plastic that's an issue, sort of smaller plastic, lots of stuff? What do you think?
That is an awesome question. I think I might even have a picture somewhere. I'll try and see if I can find a picture of it. But yes, the sea lions particularly, we see a lot of, because here at Oceanwise, we have the Marine Mammal Rescue Program, which is the only team in Canada that's able to readily mobilize in order to help stranded animals, or sometimes we also do the entanglements. We actually did one just a few days ago recently at Race Rocks off of Vancouver Island. So this does happen a lot, and they are very sturdy pieces of plastic, so it's easy for them to get stuck around somebody's neck. And then it's difficult sometimes to get them off as well. So I actually have a picture here of that happening, and you can see that it is around the female sea lion's neck. It can cause a lot of damage because it causes cuts and things like that. So absolutely, it's a problem. We see a lot of that, particularly with these plastic straps, which come around packaging. And we might also see it with fishing hooks or fishing nets that are either lost or tossed away into the ocean.
I want to highlight too, for the class asking about turtles, we do several sessions with something called the Turtle Hospital in Florida, and so quite regularly they get turtles that have plastic inside their stomachs, so you can check out those sessions as well. One last online question for now. We get this every time marine plastics are brought up. So Miss Walters' group, grade 5s in Thunder Bay, Ontario, wanted to ask, is there any large machines that are out in the oceans and lakes to filter the microplastics out?
That's a cool question. So I think one of the most popular stories is I think it's called the Ocean Cleanup Project, something like that. And it was created by a guy named Boyan Slate, who I believe is Dutch. And he was 16 when he came up with the idea. So not that much older than many of you. And he was inspired by sea anemones, which are the stinging kind of plant-looking creatures, because they will eat anything. I can speak from experience. They will eat anything that they touch. They don't pick and choose. They're very sticky. So once they grab onto plastic, they eat it. And he came up with that idea of this sort of ocean surface vacuum cleaner based on that idea. So we can be inspired by nature for inventions too, which is quite cool. The pro of that is that you could, in theory, clean up a lot of the plastic that's floating on the surface. The negative towards that, though, is, which I think a lot of people are challenging him on, is how do we make sure that the animals are safe if we're just doing a mass filtering? And that is not going to stop the plastic that is under the ocean. So things that are in the water column or things that are on the ocean floor. So it's a fantastic start. And I really want to see more inventors taking that problem and running with it. I know he's still working on it. He's still going. He's got a lot of support, which is great. But if one of you in the crowd right now thinks that they can do better, I want to see it. That's what I think is what is really needed, is a lot of really creative people coming up with those new ideas. So it's a great start. And some people are trying it. Let's keep going.
Outstanding. All right. Let's dive back in with our live classes. So Ms. Brochu's class, if you guys want to come up for a second question, go for it.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go right up to the camera so they can hear you. Nope. Oh, forgot. Anyone else? Question? Nobody has a question?
I have another.
Yeah, go on.
Don't be shy, all good.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Oh, we have a question.
If say a big animal eats like a tiny piece of plastic, would it still make them really sick?
That's a good question. So I think animals, especially the big animals, can eat a certain amount of plastic without getting sick, as long as there aren't too many chemicals. So there is a good chance that if it eats a little bit of plastic, it might just poop it out and it'll be fine. And that's great. The plastic still stays in the ecosystem and goes on to settle on the bottom of the ocean and whatnot, but that individual animal could be fine. So it's not like every time an animal eats plastic, it's gonna die. That's not the case. the challenge is that because there is so much plastic, the risk is getting higher and higher and higher.
Yeah. Excellent question, guys. All right, Miss Stevens' class. Everyone's got a question.
Is anybody at Oceanwise helping to clean up the ocean?
Yeah.
Is anybody at Oceanwise helping to clean up the ocean? Yes, actually, we do have our Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup Program, which is a citizen science project, which means you are helping scientists collect data out on the shoreline. So I definitely have a picture of that as well somewhere. Give me 1 second. But it is really helpful because you then go out and you collect litter from your shorelines, and that could be anything from the beach to a lakeside. It could also be storm drains in your city. That's really important because the storm drains usually lead directly into the waste filtration system, which can then also end up in the water or in the environment. So it's really good to also be aware of the different sources of plastic too, something to watch out for. Now, that being said, there we go. I was trying to find our data card, because what's really cool about the Shoreline Cleanup Program is as you collect data, we ask you to keep track of the amount of it and also how much it weighs. So that data we can collect, and it goes into informing us generally how much plastic we found on Canadian shorelines, at least a guess of it. It helps us determine what is the most common type of plastic we found. So for example, when we find that there are a lot of cigarette butts, for example, cigarette butts do contain plastic in them. That can go into informing city bylaws. So maybe they can increase the number of trash receptacles, or they can encourage more non-smoking programs or more reusable cigarettes or things like that. So this is helping us to understand the Canadian litter situation, and it also goes into an international database. So that's our program. There are lots of them around the world. So you don't have to join ours if you don't want to, but I highly encourage you to.
It's the best one. And so we're going to pass that to classes when we're done. But literally any of your classes, if you guys want to organize one of these cleanups, if you want to join one locally, all that information is right on the site. You can do so. You can go, and you're contributing to this global data set and cleaning up a shoreline near you. It's really fantastic. And so I urge you guys to check it out when we're done.
And it could be your school field as well. That would be a great place to start.
Everything connects to the ocean. So it's fantastic. All right. Miss Frady's class, if you guys have another question, come on up.
Is there a way to get rid of plastic, what's not burning it, and putting it into the ocean?
Is there a way to get rid of plastic that's not burning it and that's not putting it in the ocean? That's a really good thing to think about. So generally, I would say recycling could potentially be a good solution because we can turn it into other stuff. So that way, anytime we create a closed loop is the best scenario. So for example, if we were to burn it, if we can then take that energy and put it into something else, that is a closed system and it's not going back out into the environment. So anytime you can create a closed system, that is the best sort of solution that we can come up with, because it means that we're keeping control over the waste and we're not putting it into the environment. The challenge with plastic with recycling, it can be difficult. But for example, aluminum cans are great because when you break down an aluminum can, it can be turned back into an aluminum can, and we can just keep doing that over and over again. So a closed cycle is the best way to go.
Very cool. All right. And then last but not least, before we wrap up, one last question from Miss Walchuk's class. Come on up, guys.
What's in the plastic that makes like all the animals sick?
What's in the plastic that makes the animals sick? The challenge is what's not in the plastic. So for example, there are no nutrients in plastic, and that is because it's made from oil. So the oil that eventually goes into making gasoline and whatnot is also used to make plastic. And essentially they take oil, they take chemicals, they add heat, a whole bunch of chemistry happens, and then they create a very special chain of molecules that can be bent and twisted into all different things. So because it's oil-based and because there's chemicals in it, and there are no nutritional value that you would get from plants or animals or whatnot, it isn't good for anything to eat.
Very good. All right. And then we always wrap up with this question anyway, but it happens to be one that was asked by a YouTube class as well. So many questions on YouTube. It's fantastic. So Ms. Kosiniak mentioned, and you highlighted a lot of things that classrooms can do when they leave this thing. And one of them was, go tell other people. What should they tell people? If they leave this session and they go home today to their parents, what's the one thing they should take away and say with regards to this issue?
I think the most important thing is to stay positive because we have that power to make change. So for example, if you're going back to your friends and family, you can tell them about, you learned about plastic, you learned where it came from, you learned that it's a problem. Here are my ideas, let's work together to make a change ourselves. And the hope is that if every single person makes a change, that is a very large amount of change. It starts to snowball into other communities. And for example, if you do this and say, I'm gonna commit to this, join me, let's do it together, then someone else can see that and go, oh, I can do that too. Oh, that's easy. And then it starts to continue on and continue on. So stay positive and focus on the solutions. And that's the best way to start.
Outstanding. All right. Well, thank you so much, Rachel, as always. As you know, what we do at the end of every Hangout, and for new classes, I'm going to demute everybody's microphone. So Ms. Brochu, Ms. Stevens, Ms. Fraley, Ms. Walchuk's class, you guys are all demuted. Join me. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Awesome, guys. All right, so do check out for that email with all sorts of great stuff. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us, and it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesse. If you'd like